thank you. Okay. People who tune in this morning at 9 o'clock will be surprised to see, hey, we're live.
Yeah. Hello, people.
Yeah.
How many people actually tune in? You know?
Well, I can tell you this. I was watching the live stream during Shmini, Simchat Torah and stuff, and we'd have, probably during the service, remember, those are like midweek services, about 5 to 8 people, which I was kind of surprised, because I think here you probably had about, 20 people?
At least.
Yeah.
30.
Really, you can't really tell on the live stream, you only really see the front of the bima. But yeah, because I was watching it, and like on Simchat Torah, maybe about 8 people, 5 to 8 people, which is, on Shabbat, I have no idea. Because what happens is after the service, if you were to log on tomorrow and look at the live stream, the archive at this service, it might say there's 46 views. But during the service itself, only maybe 12 people are actually watching. People come and check it out after the fact. It's interesting. So, on Shabbat, let's see, I did watch on Shabbat. I'm trying to figure out how many were there when Eric was leading last Shabbat. I can't really remember. But it's nice that we do that,
Yeah.
It's kind of funny because after doing it for so long, if I'm davening here and all of a sudden I realize the live stream's out. I mean, for 27 years, I would just daven in front of the minyan that I had. But now when I realize the live stream's out, I feel like people are missing out somehow. You know what I mean? This feels like I'm not reaching the congregation I'm supposed to reach. It's just a weird feeling. What time do you have, Shelley? I just want to.
I don't have a
Oh,
watch.
don't want-
It's not working.
You have 2 minutes by my watch.
Okay, sounds good. That's what I got.
I was reading this parsha, and frankly, between you and me, I accept that there was some kind of a devastating flood. The rest is bubble light.
Well, I like what we're reading today, the story of Tower of Babel. I find that an interesting language origin story. I don't know what's up.
Well, they had to come up with some explanation for the fact that there are so many different languages.
Yeah. I'm listening to a podcast called The History of English, and so it goes back to what they call Proto-European, this language developed on the steppes of Asia that morphed into the different language groups that we have. You think how different languages are, let's say, between Vietnamese and Persian, right? Or even English, it's remarkable. Human beings, same human biology, but there's totally different way of speaking. But especially in Europe, in the European languages, they find a lot of common roots, They even have some words that said if you went back 5,000 years or something, 7 or 8 words that you would understand, people are so common. Like ox, I think, is one of them or something like that. But it's fascinating. And language is constantly evolving. Think about all the new words we have in the language today,
That's true.
because of technology or situations. Expressions. Shabbat Shalom.
Shabbat shalom.
No breakfast, no people?
What?
No breakfast, no people?
They'll roll it. We're live now. Let me ask you, how do you want to do the preliminary service? Do you want me to do kind of what the rabbi does? Want to just take it yourself?
I'm perfectly fine if you do it because you're more familiar with the.
How they do it around here?
Yeah.
Okay, I'll do that. I'll wait till you're situated. You can say hello because we're live and then we'll begin.
Perfect.
Shabbat shalom to all of you in Cyber Shul. I know you haven't seen me in a few services. It's good to be back. All is well.
Okay. Yes, Shabbat shalom. You know, today we're going to be talking a little bit about duality, and in that same vein, you know, last week I was on that side. This week I'm on this side. I'm evening things out. Wonderful to have the opportunity to work with Rabbi Berman last week and work with Cantor Zev today.
A little story about that. My brother actually, somehow or another, he found the live stream live. It was sort of on his YouTube feed Shabbat morning. And I wasn't there, of course. And he was like, yeah. And he was saying to me, I go, was it live? Are you sure it was live? I go, I think it was. There was a guy with like, with like a big beard. You know what I mean? I go, yeah, it was live.
Now, did you tell you have to tell your brother that's like, oh yeah, that was one of your campers.
That's funny. I said, yeah, that's funny. That I didn't say.
I think we do start either way with Cantor Zev on page 65 with the morning blessings.
Thank you. Baruch atah Adonai, Eloheinu melech haolam, asher natan lesech vivina, lavchid bin moven laila.
Amen.
Baruch atah Adonai, Eloheinu melech haolam, shasani b'tzalmo.
Amen.
Baruch atah Adonai, Eloheinu melech haolam, shasani Yisrael.
Amen.
Baruch atah Adonai, Eloheinu melech haolam, shasani ben chori.
Amen.
Baruch atah Adonai, Eloheinu melech haolam, poikeach divri.
Amen.
Baruch atah Adonai, Eloheinu melech haolam, mabi sharumi.
Amen.
Baruch atah Adonai, Eloheinu melech haolam, matir asuri.
Amen.
Baruch atah Adonai, Eloheinu melech haolam, zokif gifilfi.
Amen.
Baruch atah Adonai, Eloheinu melech haolam, roch haaretz alamayim.
Amen.
Baruch atah Adonai, Eloheinu melech haolam, shasali kol tzarki.
Amen.
Baruch atah Adonai, Eloheinu melech haolam, hamechid mitzadei gaver.
Amen.
Baruch atah Adonai, Eloheinu melech haolam, ozer Yisrael bigvura.
Amen.
Baruch atah Adonai, Eloheinu melech haolam, ozer Yisrael b'tifara.
Amen.
Baruch atah Adonai, Eloheinu melech haolam, Hanotei li'ayev goa.
Amen.
Baruch atah Adonai l'melech haolam, ma'amdir shnei. V'tneinu hayom v'chol yom, chinu l'ches l'rachamim, beinecha v'nei choreinu, v'tikmalenu chasadim tovim, Baruch atah Adonai. Gomel chasadim tovim le'amo Yisrael.
Amen.
And we will continue our service, as is our custom, on page 72 with the Psalm for Shabbat. Mizmor shili yom HaShabbat tov lehodol l'Adonai u'lizamer l'shimcha elyon u'lizamer l'shimcha elyon. Mizmor shili yom HaShabbat tov lehodol l'Adonai u'lizamer l'shimcha elyon u'lizamer l'shimcha elyon. Le'hagid ba'boker chazdecha v'monatcha ba'leilot. Alei Asur v'alei Novel, alei Higayom b'chinor, Mizmor shili yom HaShabbat tov lehodol l'Adonai, u'lizamer l'shimcha elyon, u'lizamer l'shimcha elyon. We'll conclude the psalm, the last 4 lines. Tzadik ata amar yivra, ki eres Lebanon is Shetulim b'beit Adonai v'chadrot Eloheinu yarichu od yidun b'seiva dishein v'rananim yiyu le'hagid ki yashar Adonai
continue the service on page 81 at the bottom. Or 81, let's do Psalm 81. Psalm 30, page 81. Afachta mispedil machali, bidachas akividas venisimcha, lemad nizar mecha chavav lo yidaho, Adonai Elohai le'el hamodeka.
I believe there's only two in the other room.
What?
I believe there's only two in the other room.
Oh, okay, thank you. Well, then we'll continue on page 83. You're invited to rise for Baruch Shamar. Baruch Shamar v'hayaolam Baruch Hu Baruch Hoseh v'rishit Baruch Omer v'yoseh Baruch Hoseh v'mekayim Baruch merachem al haaretz Baruch merachem al habriyot Baruch mishalem sachar tov l'reyav Baruch Elad V'kayam hanetzach Baruch v'hodeh u'matzil Baruch Shemo Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam Ha'elav ha'rachaman Ha'mehulal b'fi amo V'shubach mefo'ar b'lshon chasidav v'yavadav V'shirei David avdecha na'alelcha Adonai Eloheinu V'shvachot v'zmirot Nekadelcha nishabecha na'fahercha V'nazgir shivcha v'namlicha v'aginu Eloheinu Yachid chei olamim Melech v'shubach mefo'ar adei ad shemo ha'gadol Baruch Adonai Melech melech v'yishbacha.
Amen.
May be seated. We continue on page 85 at the bottom. Romimu, Romimu, Adonai Eloheinu, V'shtachavu, V'shtachavu, L'Adam Raglav Kadoshu, Romimu, Romimu, Adonai Eloheinu, V'shtachavu, V'shtachavu, Le'har Kodesh, Ki Kadosh, Ki Kadosh, Adonai Eloheinu, Ya la 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 la. Hey! Very good. Let's continue on page 86, the middle of the page, with Hoshea et Amecha. Hoshea et Amecha, Uvarech et Nachaladecha, Urim, 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 Benasim, Urim, Benasim ad Haolam. Hoshea et Amecha, Uvarech et Nachaladecha, Urim, 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 Benasim, Urim, Benasim ad Haolam. Now we continue on page 88 with Psalm 34, one of my favorite psalms, just because I like how it's laid out as an acrostic. And we will hit the, what the rabbi calls, what does he call them?
Like the greatest hits?
I like to call them greatest hits. He calls them like old familiar friends. So let's start with the Gimel. God l'Adonai l'neromem ha'shemo yachdav. Then we go down to the Yud. Yirdu et Adonai ki doshav ki ein machzor li'reyav k'firim ra'ashu v'ra'evu v'doreshei Adonai yolach v'choto. I need discipline not to go to the rest of it, that you usually do at Birkat. But we don't, for this particular psalm, we'll skip the Lamed and we'll go to the Mem, a popular song in Israel several decades ago that we sing here. Mi ha'ish echafet chayim, ohev yamim liroto, mitzor lishon chameira, Uzvatecha medaber mirma, sur mira ve'azetoh, bagi shalom ve'radfehu. Mi ha'ish echafet chayim, ohev yamim liroto. And now we continue on page 92, And let's try this melody. We'll do the first four and the last four of this song, page Psalm 136. לעושה שמיים בדרונה, כי לעולם חסדו. לרוגע הארץ על המים, כי לעולם חסדו. העשה אורים גדולים, כי לעולם חסדו. את השמש למשלת ביום, כי לעולם חסדו. לסיחון מלך האמורי, כי לעולם חסדו. ולעוג מלך הבשן, כי לעולם חסדו. ונתן ארצם לנחלה, כי לעולם חסדו. נחלה לישראל עבדו, כי לעולם חסדו. שבשפלנו זכר לנו, כי לעולם חסדו. ויברכנו מצרנו, כי לעולם חסדו. נותן לחם בשר, כי לעולם חסדו. הודלהו השמיים, כי לעולם חסדו. Now we will continue on page 96 with the Ashrei as follows. Ashrei Yoshvei Veitecha Od Yehalel Chazela. Ashrei Am Shekacha Lo. Ashrei Am Shadonai Elohav. Tila LeDavid Rabim Chalai Velach. Tilachad Adonai, Dahamer Bivi, Varech Obasar, Shimcho Sholer Lamayed, Vahadachnu Nivarech Yah, Me'atavi Adolam, Hallelujah. On the bottom of page 97. Yimloch Adonai Le'olam, Elohai Zion, Dor Vador, Hallelujah. Hallelujah. Page 99, at the very bottom of this page is another one of our old friends. And we used to sing this regularly during the pandemic when we were live streaming because we didn't have a Torah service to remind us of the Torah service. So very at the bottom, 5 lines from the bottom. Hallelujah, Shem Adonai, Ki nizkar Shema levado, Adon eretz v'shamayim, v'yarem geren v'yamo, Tila lechol chazida, Livnei Yisrael, Am Kirovo, Hallelujah, Hallelujah. And now we come to those concluding psalms. Let's go to page 100 and sing Psalm 150, the last of the book of Psalms, with one of my favorite tunes like this. Kol neshama hallelujah, hallelujah. Kol neshama hallelujah, hallelujah, hallelujah. Hallelujah, 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 neshama de hallelujah, hallelujah. Kol neshama de hallelujah, hallelujah, hallelujah. B'nei Gashovar, hallelujah. B'nei Vervechinar, hallelujah. B'tov u'machol, hallelujah. B'mini v'ilgav, kol ha'neshama de hallelujah, hallelujah. Kol ha'neshama de hallelujah, hallelujah, hallelujah. B'tzil t'lejama, hallelujah. B'tzil t'lejama, kol ha'neshama de hallelujah, hallelujah. Kol ha'neshama de hallelujah, hallelujah. Kol ha'neshama de hallelujah, hallelujah. Baruch Adonai le'olam amen v'amen. Baruch Adonai ben Zion shechin Yerushalayim, hallelujah. Baruch Adonai Elohim, Elohei Yisrael, Hoseni v'lo levado, Baruch Shem kivodo le'olam, Yimalech v'dado kol haaretz, amen v'amen. I invite you to rise, page 101, 3 lines from the top of the page. L'cha Adonai ha'gidula v'ha'givura v'ha'tiferet v'ha'neitza v'ha'od ki chol ha'shamayim v'ha'aretz ki chol ha'shamayim v'ha'aretz L'cha Adonai ha'malacha v'amin naseh l'chol rosh. And we'll continue. Tahu Adonai Elohim, Hashem acharta be'Avraham, v'hosetim re'akasdim, b'samta shmo Avraham, u'mitzat levavo ne'eman lefanecha, v'charotim arvidan, v'yoham be'gad alivnehem, v'yavu v'tochem elasha, v'rodfehem yishtach v'ntzalot, כמו אבן במים עזים. 102. ויוש אדוני ביום ההוא את ישראל מיד מצרים, וירא ישראל את מצרים מעיד על שפת הים, וירא ישראל את היד הגדולה, אשר עשה אדוני במצרים, וירם את אדוני, ויעמידו באדוני ובמשה עבדו. אז ישיר משה ובני ישראל את השירה הזאת לאדוני ויאמרו לאמור השירה לאדוני כי גאולה סוס ורחמו רחמה וים עוזי וזמרתיה ויהי לי לישועה Zeili v'yarel, Elohei aviv arom emenu. Adonai ish milchama, Adonai shemo. Markivot paro v'chilo, Yaharav vayam. U'mivchar shalishav, T'behu v'yamsu. T'ilmod echadivu, Yadlim shalom g'mohaven, Yimincha Adonai, V'darim ha'koach, Yimincha Adonai, Tirat zoyev. Naim lach leila ma'ed, naim lach leila ma'ed. Ki l'Adonai Amelucha Moshe B'Chaim, Alu Moshe Martzion Nishpot Et Ha'Esav, V'Yital Adonai Amelucha, V'Yadonai Lemelech Al Haaretz, V'Yomahu, Yadonai Echad U'Shemo Echad. Be seated, 104. Nishma Kol Chai, Tivarech Et Shem Adonai Eloheinu, V'Ruach Moshe. Join me in the second paragraph. Ilufinu male shira, shira kayam, ushonenu rina kamon, kamon galam. Ilufinu male shira, shira kayam, Kamon, kamon galal, ilufinu male shira, shira kayam, ushonenu rina kamon, kamon galal, kamon galal, kamon galal. Continue on page 105, bottom of the first paragraph. Shabbat Shalom, everyone. We continue the middle of page 105. Shulchan Marav Begado Shemo Vichadu Vanu Zadiki Madunai Vaisharim Navatila Bifisharim Nidala Vidivri Zadiki Bidbara Viljan Chazidim Nidroma Uvikelem Gidoshim Tigadat V'makalot Vivon Amcha B'in Yisrael V'hodol Adal Shabeach V'felomim Levarech V'adel V'aleh V'aleo Kalis V'agodim Rishvot V'nishbechot David Ben Yishai Avdecha Mishichecha. We rise. Eric, you can get it.
We're on page 106.
Yishtabach Shimcha Lad Malkinu. Birachad Adon Me'atav Yadolam Baruch Adonai Melech Adonai Tishbachot Elahod Adonai Nivlachot Habachel B'shiri Zimra Melech Elchei Olamim Yidgada Shemi Rabbah
Amen.
Yalva Divrach Yehudev Yamelech Malchutei V'chayechon uvyomechon V'chayidecho Beit Yisrael Bagala Ubizman Kavi Vimrel
Amen.
Yesh Me'Rabba Mevora Li'olam Lo Me'olmaya Yidbarach Vishtabach Vidbar Vidma Vidnasi Vidhadar Vidale Vidalal Shemede Gudijah Vila Midgo Birlachada Vishirada
me'alma.
V'imreu.
Amen. Our official call to worship, the Baruch Hu, page 107.
Baruch Hu Adonai HaMevorach.
You may be seated.
Join me with the blessing after the Baruch Hu. Baruch atah Adonai, Eloheinu melech haolam, yotzer or v'rei choshech, oseh shalom v'rei hakol. HaKadosh HaVakol Yishavchu HaVakol Lin Kadosh Adonai Kol Ruach HaSel Yotzel Kol. Hingege Chachavim Zulai De'achefes Bildecha Hamido Melach Hingege Chan Eloheinu Olam Hazeh Pinzul Halcha Malkinu L'chai Olam Haba Efes B'decha Goleinu L'mod HaMashiach V'yinu Melech HaMosheinu L'chiyat HaMetim.
Page 108.
El Adon Kol HaMasim Baruch Mevorach V'Fikol Neshama Gadlo V'Tuvo Malei Olam Da'at V'Ruhana Sovevi Moto HaMihikael HaChayot HaKodesh V'Nedar B'Chavod HaMerkava Zechud U'Mishor Livnei Chisom Chesed V'Rachamim Livnei Chivodo Tovim me'orot shebara Eloheinu Yitzaram B'da'at B'bina U'baskel Koach U'Gvura Natan Bahem Li'od Moshim B'kerev Babel Le'im Ziv U'Fikim Nogam Na'ezivam B'chol ha'olam Semechim B'seitam V'sasim B'voam Ozim B'yem Arizon Kohanam Bechavod lo nimel lishmol zola verina vezechem achudo karel hashemesh vayizrachon from the hikim surat habana shevach lo nimlo kol seva marom iveret ugedula shrapim v'yafanim v'chayot hakodesh. Continue on 109. Tikbarak Sureinu Makinu Megavaleinu Brek Rashishach. Kulam Hovim, Kulam Birurim, Kulam Giborim, Kulam Osibim Abrabertson Kana, Kulam Borkevit Biem, Bigdu Shabbatara, Bishra Ovezimra, Mavarch Meshabachim, Mfarbim Arizim, Umagdishim Umahamichim, Et Shema El HaMelech HaGadol, HaGibor HaNorah HaKadosh Hu. Binachar Huach Zafar Ravnima, Kiddush HaKolam Gechadonim Yomrim B'yirah, Kadosh, 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 Adonai Tzvaot, Melech Haaretz Gedolah, Lavani V'chayot HaKodesh Rash Gadol, V'nasim V'matzravim, V'madam Shavachim V'yomrim, Baruch Adonai V'molod. El Baruch Bottom of page 110. Ur chadash al Sion tahir v'nizkeh olanu meira le'ora. Ur chadash al Sion tahir v'nizkeh olanu meira le'ora. Baruch atah Adonai Yotzer HaMe'orat.
Our second of two blessings before this, leading up to the Shema, page 111.
Avtanu Adonai Eloheinu Chemel Agel Chamalta Aleinu Avinu Malkeinu Ba'avur Avoteinu Shebarchu V'cha Shebarchu V'cha Avinu Malkeinu V'tilamden Chukei Chayim K'techanenu Lamedeinu Avinu Avarachamai Amarachim Rachim Aleinu V'tein B'libeinu Le'avin V'avinu L'azkir Lishma V'limod U'lilamed Lishmar V'lasot U'likayim Et Kol Divrei Talmud Toratecha V'yahava V'ha'areneinu V'toratecha V'dabik libeinu V'mitzvotecha V'yachid V'livavinu V'yachava U'yira Et Shemecha V'lo nevos V'olam ba'ed V'lo nevos V'olam ba'ed
Ki Hashem
Kodshecha Hagadol Hanora B'adamnu Nagila V'nismecha Nagila V'nismecha V'shivatecha V'havienu V'shalom
Tzitzi.
Me'arim B'kanivod Aretz V'talicheinu Kamimilut Le'yarseinu Ki el Bovel Yishudada Uvahanu V'charida V'kol Avilajan V'kir Avdanu L'shimcha Gadol Selah B'yemet Liyodolecha U'liyachedecha Be'ahava Baruch atah Adonai Habuchir B'amo Yisrael B'ahava Shema Yisrael Adonai Eloheinu Adonai Echad V'yahavitahid Adonai Elohecha V'chol levavcha v'chol nafshecha v'chol meodecha V'hayu ha'devarim ha'ile Asher anochi betzavecha hayom ha'levavecha V'shin adam levanecha v'ni b'hartam V'shivdecha b'vitecha v'lechlecha ha'vaderech V'shokmecha u'v'kumecha V'geshadav l'hoda yadecha V'hayu todavot b'nenecha V'chidavdam Amzuzot b'techa V'visharecha.
Continue privately through the middle of page 113.
V'nai lechem emet, v'yatzif nachom hakam v'yasher l'mam. V'dulvadahu geham l'shmageham, v'chison achor malchudah, v'emunadahu l'ad gayamet. V'av chaim chamim nemrim l'chlim l'ad. Kol me'onim ozim. Mahakenu melech avodenu, kolinu goel avodenu, tzvenu tzvishu adenu, polidenu matzilenu melav shemecha, ein Elohim zulatecha.
114.
Rat avodenu adal me'olam, maginu shalem. Emet, 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 atahu rishon. Emet, 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 atahu aharon. Umibaladecha ein lanu melech, melech oel Moshiach. Umibaladecha ein lanu melech, melech oel Moshiach. So I'm God's Join me in the middle of 114. Micha mocha ba'ilim Adonai. Please rise. Micha mocha nedar b'kodesh. Nora dihila osevele. Micha mocha ba'ilim Adonai. Micha mocha nedar b'kodesh. Nora dihila osevele. Shira chadasha shebechlu gilulim l'shimcha. Azvadayam yachagulam ha'odu lihim lichu v'yamru Adonai yimlach le'olam va'ed. Tzor Yisrael Kulma b'ezrat Yisrael v'dei v'dumela Yehuda Yisrael Kol alinu Adonai tzvot shemo Kidos Yisrael Baruch Adonai Yisrael.
The opportunity for private Amidah, pages 115 to 120. we join Cantor Zev with the Hazarat Hashatz, the repetition of the Amidah, page 115a.
Baruch Adonai Eloheinu v'Elohei Avoteinu Elohei Avraham Elohei Yitzchak Elohei Yaakov Ha'el HaGadol HaGibor v'Hanor Ha'el Elyon Kol Melech Zadim Tovim Megonei HaGol V'Zacher Chasdei Avot U'Mevi Goel Livnei V'Neim Leman Shebo B'Yavam Melech Ozer Moshe U'Magen Baruch Adonai Magen Avraham
Amen.
Hadagi Bor Leolam Adonai Mechemedi Ma'odar Rav Lojia Mashiva Ruach Marida Gashem Mechal Kel Chayim Bechesed B'chayim Medim B'rachamim Rabim Zomech Navim V'rovech Olim U'madir Asurim U'mekayim Emunadavi Shenei Avar Michamocha B'givurot U'mida Melach Melech B'mid U'mechayeh U'matzmiach Yeshua V'neman Adalach Hayod Medim Baruch Adonai Mechayeh HaMedim.
Amen. We rise, page 116.
Nikadesh et Shimcha ba'olam Kishem shem makdishim oto b'shmei marom Kakadol hoyot nevi'echa V'garazel zel ve'amar Kadosh, Kadosh, Kadosh Adonai Tzibaot Melech haaretz kivodo Az b'kol Gadol, Hader v'chazak mashvim kol, Menasim le'umat zirafim, Le'umat am baruch yom Hebrew, Baruch Yivad Adonai b'mkom. B'mkom chomakin l'tofiyah, V'timlach aleinu k'mechagim anachna lach, Madai Divlach B'Zion Bekarol B'Yameinu L'Lamed Tishgon Tidkadash V'Tidkadash V'Doch Yerushalayim Mirecha V'Dor Vador V'Nitzach Nitzachim V'Eineinu Tirena Tirena Malchutecha Kadavar Hamor B'Shirei Uzecha V'Eineinu Tirena Tirena Malchutecha Kadavar Hamor B'Shirei Uzecha Al Yedei Navi Al Yedei Navi Al Yedei Navi Mashiach Tzidkecha Al Yedei Navi Al Yedei Navi Al Yedei Navi Mashiach Tzidkecha Yimlach Adonai Le'olam El Hayam Tzion V'Dor Hallelujah L'dor V'Ador Nagid Golecha L'netzon Nizog M'Nashadecha Nagdish Shivchacha V'Hen M'Pinam V'Shelam V'Hed Ki Yomelch Kol V'Kadosh Ata Baruch Adonai Ha'el HaKadosh.
Continue on page 117. You may be seated.
Yismach Moshe b'matnat chelko ki even ne'eman karatalo Galil tiferet b'rosh shanatata b'yamna levanecha al har Sinai Shnei luchot avarim oharid b'yado v'chadu b'hem Shemirat Shabbat v'chatu b'hem. Shemirat Shabbat v'chatu b'hem. Shemirat Shabbat v'chikatu b'toratecha. V'shamru v'nei Yisrael et ha-Shabbat. Lasod et ha-Shabbat d'adam berid olam. Beini uvein b'nei Yisrael oti le'olam. Beini uvein b'nei Yisrael oti le'olam. Ki sheishet yamim asad Adonai et hashamayim v'et haaretz. V'yom hashvi'i Shabbat v'yi navash. V'yom hashvi'i Shabbat v'yi navash. V'lo nidada Adonai Eloheinu l'geras of Eloheinu chal makin l'avdei v'sehilim v'gamnu chadol eshkinu v'arehilim ki l'Yisrael amcha hanidada b'yava l'zer Yaakov asher b'macharda mekadosh eshuvi kulam yizbilvid hagul mitzuvecha v'ashavi ratzita bo v'kidashdo chem nad yamim ata garada zecher l'ma'aseh v'reshit Eloheinu Elohi avodeinu ritzevim l'chateinu kadesheinu b'mitzvotecha v'tein chelkeinu b'toratecha sameinu mituvecha v'samcheinu b'shuvatecha v'taher libeinu yomdecha be'emet v'hanchilenu Adonai Eloheinu Yehovah u'v'ratzon Shabbat kodecha v'yanuchu v'Yisrael Mekadesh shemecha Baruch atah Adonai Mekadesh HaShabbat. Amen. Page 118. Ritzei Adonai Eloheinu b'macha Yisrael v'tevel adam v'hashem elov dalim v'betecha. Ritzei Adonai Eloheinu b'macha Yisrael v'tevel adam v'hashem elov dalim v'betecha u'tevilatam v'yava de'go v'beratzon Lili ratzon damid avodat Yisrael amecha u'tevilatam Be'ova deko beveratzon Lili ratzon damid avodat Yisrael amecha Ritzei V'techezena eineinu B'shuvchis yom rachavim Baruch atah Adonai Amacha zeshechinato L'tzion Modim anachnu lach Atov gilach al rachamecha Amerochti v'gilu damachadadecha Me'olam givinu lach.
Middle of 119.
V'yach l'amid brach v'yitmam shimcha magnet amid le'olam ba'ed v'chol ha'chayim yaducha sela v'yahalu et shimcha b'yemet ha'eu yishradinu b'ezradinu sela Baruch atah Adonai Adonai Chol Elihodo
Amen.
Eloheinu v'Elohi avoteinu Barucheinu l'bracha HaMishulez b'Torah K'duvayim Moshe Avdecha HaMurami b'Yaron u'Banav Kohanim Groshecha Gamur. Yivarechecha Adonai Vishmerecha.
Eini Ratzon.
Yair Adonai Banabelecha Vichuneka.
Eini Ratzon.
Is Adonai Banabelecha Viazim Lecha Shalom.
Ein Yehi Ratzon.
Page 120. Sim Shalom Dova Uvracha Ba'olam Chin V'Chesed V'Rachamim Alinu Alinu V'Al Kol Yisrael V'Al Kol Yisrael Amecha. Sim Shalom Dova Uvracha Ba'olam Chin V'Chesed V'Rachamim Alinu Alinu V'al Kol Yisrael, V'al Kol Yisrael Amecha. Barachinu Avinu Kulanu Gecha B'Rabanecha, B'Rabanecha Nadada Lanu Adonai Eloheinu, Torah Chaim Yavahal Chesed, U'Zidagaha U'Virachaha V'Rachamim V'Chaim V'Shalom, V'Dov B'Necha Levarich Et Amcha Yisrael, B'Chol Ein V'Chosha B'Shlomecha Baruch Adonai HaMivarich L'Mo Yisrael B'Shalom.
Kaddish Shalem, concluding the Shachrit section of our prayers, page 138.
Amen.
Amen. Yeshmei Rabba Mevora, Leolam Me'omaya, Yitbarach.
Yitbarach Yishtabach, Yitbarach Nomenaseh, V'Dadarach V'David Al-Shemei, Yidikodesh.
Merichu.
Elam Yikol Berachadav V'Shivadav, V'Chadav V'Chavadah, V'Ramadamav V'Yimru.
Amen.
Yitkabel Sodom V'Odom D'Chol Yisrael, Kadav V'Hon V'Shmaya V'Yimru.
Amen.
Yishlam Rabim Shemaya V'Chaim Aleinu V'Chol Yisrael V'Yimru.
Amen.
V'Aseh Shalom B'Rama, V'Aseh Shalom Aleinu, V'Al Kol Yisrael V'Yimru. Amen.
May be seated momentarily. And I guess Shabbat Shalom. It's good to see all of you 2 weeks in a row. Sort of makes up for 18, 19 months largely without. Our Torah service will start on page 139. Today we read from the parashah where we see what happens when we, recite a little too much with a little too much fervor of Mashiv HaRuach Marid Hagashem. But without further ado, page 139.
In kamocha va'elohim Adonai v'in k'maasecha malechudecha malechad kol olamim v'memshadecha b'chol v'adar Adonai melech Adonai malach Adonai imlach ve'lahamoed Adonai os v'yamo yitain Adonai yivarech Edom v'shalom. Avarachamim hitiv avirzonecha et Zion. Himnech omot Yerushalayim. Himnech omot Yerushalayim. Kivecha levad
We rise as the ark is opened. May your favor abide with your people, Israel. Feel free to join with me. And may your redeeming power be revealed to them in your sanctuary. Bless us with your light, and with compassion accept our prayer. May it be your will to grant us long life and well-being, to count me among the righteous, and to guard me, my family, and all your people Israel with compassion. You nourish and sustain all life. You rule over all, even kings, for dominion is yours. Be'an Arachis, the box at the top of 140.
Be'an Arachis, Velish Mekarisha, Karisha Yakira, Anaim Ardus Mevan. Be'an Arachis, Be'an Arachis, Velish Mekarisha, Karisha Yakira, Anaim Ardus Mevan. Yei Rava, Anava, Devita Levi, V'Oraida, V'Nazim Yishalim, Levi, V'Liva Echolama, Yisrael, V'Nava L'chaim, V'Lisha, Amen.
We recite after Cantor Zev, page 141.
Shema Yisrael, Adonai Eloheinu, Adonai Echad. Shema Yisrael, Adonai Eloheinu, Adonai Echad Eloheinu, Gadol Adonai, Gadol Shemo. Echad Eloheinu, Gadol Adonai, Gadol Shemo. Gadol Adonai iti, L'deromema, Shemo Yachedav, Lecha Adonai, Hagiduna, Hagiduna, Hagiduna.
Ve'ametza v'chahol, ki hol b'shamayim u'va'aretz, ki hol b'shamayim u'va'aretz. Echad Adonai hamalacha, aminaseh l'chol l'rosh. Ramemu, Ramemu, Adonai Eloheinu. V'hishtachavu, v'hishtachavu, dam raglav kadoshu. Ramemu, Ramemu, Adonai Eloheinu. V'hishtachavu, v'hishtachavu.
Kadosh, Kadosh, Adonai Eloheinu.
As the Torah is seated, so you too may be seated. Here's where I try to remember the order of things because I don't have the what happened on this day. The answer is let's just believe good stuff. And I think, forgot, cover what we don't read and cover the sermon now, right?
Yeah.
Okay. So Shabbat Shalom. Again, it's wonderful to have the privilege and opportunity to be here with you. Rabbi Berman is on a day off. Nothing else going on there that I am aware of.
I think it's Kai's birthday today. Yeah, it is.
Okay. I should remember these things from my tidings. But
Welcome, Facebook. Yeah.
that's right. But so this week, if we had early morning Torah study today, which we did not, it was last week, what we would have talked about, I'm certain, or what people would have brought up, is sort of what they brought up again, what they actually brought up last week, which is what? They said, we don't know, because, you know, it was last week. No, but that it seems to be, according to Richard Elliott Friedman, that there are two stories of Noah, two tellings of the story woven together. And as we talked about a little bit last, we saw at the very beginning of Bereshit that there were two stories. And it was something that was, you know, that is always a little bit of confusion, discussion, interpretation. And one of the interpretations that I began learning about this past year is the one offered by Rabbi Joseph Soloveitchik in his book, The Lonely Man of Faith. And what he describes is that he says that there is, I love that he, you know, the fancy phrasing that I learned, ontological dualism. In other words, that there are two sides to the nature of being, and that there are two sides of a religious being, and that each of the tellings, that each of the parts of these, each of the tellings or the seeming duplication of this story is a different side. And so in the case of the two Adams, we are dealing with a tension between conquest, or the tangible, and surrender, or the spiritual. In the case of the story of Noah, we have a story that is, or a telling that is very, very meticulous, dealing with exact measurements, and, well, especially exact measurements and sizing and spacing, and one that seems to be just a little more sort of free-flowing, or sort of, well, less meticulous, you could say. And one of the things that I think about when it comes to this is, you know, sort of how can you get the best relationship, especially to what is described in the story of Noah, is how many people here are musicians that play musical instruments, or are singers, you know. A few people have raised their hands. How many? In this case, it potentially doesn't, but, you know, a good question. And how many people have attended musical concerts ever in their life? Okay, good. I think we got unanimity here. And so, when you attend a concert, how many times have you heard somebody who played something absolutely note perfect, that if you know how to read music, you could follow along on the page and you could see absolute perfection? And as you were listening to it, something sounded completely wrong. Again, you listen to something, it is absolutely perfect to the page, and yet something feels completely wrong. And what is it that is wrong? What is it that is missing? Is that in order to make a piece of music, vocal or instrumental, sound truly alive, is that you have to get it right and you have to give it life. That the person who only plays to the page is only presenting half of the story. And so too, with our telling of the story of Noah, there are two voices that are needed in order to make it complete. Within our Torah, we keep on hearing about a tension because there are two pieces of things that are needed in order to make things complete. Within some study, you hear about the Yetzer Hara and the Yetzer Hatov, the good and the evil, sort of essence or presence, and that they say, you know, why can't it just be a good world? Because without it, without our Yetzer Hatov, without sort of an evil inclination, things would not be complete. Why is it that we cannot celebrate Shabbat every day of the week? Because Judaism recognizes that there has to be differences in order for things to be complete. And so, you know, Judaism is very concerned with how to blend and mend, blend and mend the spiritual and the physical, how to spiritualize the physical and the mundane, how to blend the two parts in order to make a very full and complete whole. We see a challenge in what happens when only one of these seems to be addressed or one is overly favored over the other. In our reading from last week, there are two sons, Cain and Abel. Each of them do something in their own way. They offer a sacrifice, and what is it that happens? God seems to only recognize or appreciate one of them. And whereas in our romantic love stories, sometimes of the Torah, often not, hilarity ensues, in the case of the story of Cain and Abel, tragedy ensues. In the case of in the case of Parashah Noah, a part that we do not read today, when Noah exits the ark, what is the first thing that he personally does according to the text? He plants a vineyard, and he seems to get drunk. Well, it's not he seems. According to the text, he gets drunk. And even there are two divergent opinions as to what could be going on. Because God speaks to Moses, having come out of the ark, and tells him something that is fairly incomplete. That he essentially says, just trust me, it's going to be okay. God gives no recognition of the trauma that Noah has just incurred. And one interpretation is that Noah, in this trauma, finds the only escape that he can, which is drunkenness. But another side of the story is that God potentially spoke to him with a sense of renewal, and that Noah saw himself as another first man and was recreating creation, planting and reaping and enjoying the bounty. All of this does flow very well into the part of Torah that we will be reading from today. The very short story of the Tower of Babel. It takes up only, it's a well-known story that is only 9 verses long. Sometimes in Torah that could be seen as a long story. But what we have is that at the beginning, all people spoke with one voice. They work on a construction project. God decides to make it a Department of Transportation project and delay things, and does that through his version of requiring permits and inspections, otherwise known as making people speak differently. Okay, I found that funny. Perhaps you didn't. But really, we start with one voice, and God, in seeing how things are going, decides to offer them multiple languages, multiple voices. And often we look at this as a story of hubris, as God, in recognizing a negativity in people and in sort of knocking them down from their high perch, sort of pun intended because of the high tower or minaret that they were building. But in fact, Rabbi Yeshayahu Leibovitz, the brother of the maybe better known modern commentator Naomi Leibovitz, says that's not necessarily the case. That in fact God was offering compassion to people because God is starting to recognize that when there is only one, independent of something like the Shema that we get much, much later, but when there is only one aspect that is just commandeering everything that we do, there becomes a totalitarianism of self and community. That God offered compassion and grace, you could say, in creating different languages, because only when people spoke in different languages were multiple voices, multiple aspects, multiple views able to be spoken and heard. So the blessing that I offer to all of us today is that may we remember that while we have strengths and we play to them, there is more than one side and more than one aspect to what we do. May we recognize the and in all of it, the and in how we approach things, that there are left and right sides. There are times where we are going to be social. There are times where we are going to be, a little more introverted. And also may we recognize that there are ands in the things around us, that there is this voice and that voice. And when we have the patience and the pause to listen to and embrace all of them, that is when we reach the beginning of beautiful stories and beautiful accomplishments like Avram, who is going to appear at the end of this. We become a better and more talented people, a holier being. Shabbat Shalom. What we don't read this week is essentially everything of the namesake of the parashah, being Noah. So the entire story that hopefully you did not come for, because we're not reading it, is what is covered, including the building of the ark, the flood, and the aftermath of it. I'm turning too far. That includes the lineage of Noah. One of the few things to point out is that his son Shem has a son Aver. In Midrash, Shem and Aver happened to run one of the first academies. And also my favorite biblical name happens to come out from the son of Cush. There's nothing like the good biblical name Nimrod. So that is what we do not read. Today we will be reading the entirety of chapter 11, which starts on page 58.
Ja, så vi agerer og kjører seg på den. Amen. Hamel havu gurlen og fulla Torah. Yamod kohen. Yamod Ruvain. Ben Meir kohen kohen. Baruch Natan Torah Masabek Gushalto. Atzem Avik Melechem. Chaim Gochem Hayom. Let's practice. That's it, yeah. Right here. This is
Baruch hu et Adonai haborah.
Baruch Nabrach Le'Olam.
Baruch Adonai Baruch Le'Olam voed. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech olam. Asher bachar banu mikol ha'amin v'noatan lanu et Torato. Baruch atah Adonai noten haTorah.
Amen. Vayehi chol haaretz safa echad udvarim achadim. Vayehi ben asa mikedem v'yimtzu v'ika eretz shinar v'yishbu sham. Vayomru isharehu hava nel ben halevanim v'nisrafa l'srifa utehi lahem halavana la'aven v'hachemar v'haya lahem lachomer. Vayomru hava nivne lanu ir. Umigdal v'rosho b'shamayim v'na'aseh lanu shem v'nafutz al pnei kol haaretz.
Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech olam. Asher notan lanu Torah emes v'chayei olam. Notah b'tocheinu. Baruch atah Adonai,
Shmo.
Noten haTorah.
Amen. Yamud Levi Amud Moshe Simcha ben Yaakov Alevi Gittel. Levi.
The entirety of this story of the Tower of Babel is through these first two readings, the second of which is going to be chapter 11, verse 5 through 9. Said the opening of this is everyone on earth had the same language and the same words. Isn't what I spoke about. And it's interesting that that immediately after a flood, they decided to reside in a valley, and perhaps, who knows, maybe it's no coincidence that having just had everything flooded, they decided to build a high point that potentially would be a place that could always be seen and would be a place of safety. Second reading, verses 5 through 9.
Baruch et Adonai habarach. Baruch Adonai barach le'olam va'ed. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam. Asher bachar banu mikol ha'amim. V'natan lanu et Torato. Baruch atah Adonai Noten haTorah.
Amen. Vayired Adonai lirot et ha'ir v'et ha'migdal. Asher banu b'nei ha'adam. Vayomer Adonai hin am echad v'sava echad l'kulam mizeh halicham la'asod hachilem la'asod v'ata lo yibatzer mehem kol asher yazmu la'asod hava nirda v'niv laha sham sfatam asher lo yishmu ish svat re'ehu v'yafet Adonai otam misham al pnei chol haaretz v'yachtelu livnot ha'ir agin kara shama Babel ki sham balal Adonai svat kol haaretz u'misham hefitzam Adonai al pnei chol haaretz.
Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam. Asher natan lanu Torah emet v'chaye olam nata b'tochenu. Baruch atah Adonai Noten haTorah.
Amen. Yamud Shlishi. Yamud Gula b'Rafael v'Madam Bomu Shlishi.
So reading from Bereshit, we get a lot of lineage, and the sections that will be read from now to the end sounds very familiar to, or in a very similar pattern to what we read last week. The one difference that jumps out, though, is that after they begot sons and daughters, in this case, they don't mention that they died.
Baruch Adonai HaMevorach. Baruch Adonai HaMevorach L'olam va'ed. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam. Asher bachar banu mikol ha'amim v'natan lanu et Toratu. Baruch atah Adonai Noten haTorah.
Amen. Ele todot shem ben meyat shana vayoled et arpachshad shnatayim achar hamabul vaychi sheim achari holidu arpachshad chamish meyot shana vayoled bani muvanot arpachshad chai chamish u'shloshim shana vayoled et shalach vaychi arpachshad achari holidu et shalach shalosh shanim v'arba meyot shana vayoled bani muvanot.
Emet Toratenu HaKedusha. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam. Asher natan lanu et Toratu. Torat emet v'chaye ulam nata b'tochenu. Baruch atah Adonai Noten haTorah.
Amen. Yamud Revi.
Good to see you.
Yamud Yehuda ben Ephraim. Revi. Shalach. Okay. Take your seat. Take your seat. Like that.
Baruch Adonai HaMevorach.
Baruch Adonai Olam Va'ed.
Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam. Asher bachar banu
Amen. Veselecha 30 shana vayoled iver. Vayechi shelach acharei holedu et iver. Shalosh shanim v'arba me'ot shana vayoled banim uvanot. Vayechi iver ba 30 shana vayoled et palag. Vayechi iver acharei holedu et pelag. 30 shana v'arba me'ot shana vayoled banim uvanot.
ברוך אתה אדוני אלוהינו מלך העולם אשר נתן לנו תורת אמת בחיינו נתנה בתוכנו ברוך אתה אדוני ונותן לך תורה.
Amen. Amor Chamishi, Amor Ben Sion, Memarach Betzipara, Chamishi.
This will be verses 18 to 21.
Baruch hu Adonai Hamborach. Baruch Adonai Hamborach le'olam va'ed. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech ha'olam asher bachar banu mikol ha'amim v'natan lanu et Torah. Baruch atah Adonai noten ha'torah.
Amen. Vayechi Pelev 30 shana vayoled et Reu. Vayechi Peleg acharei holedu et Reu. Tisha shanim 200 shana vayoled banim uvanot. Vayechi Reu 30 shana vayoled et Serug. Vayechi Reu acharei holedu et Serug. Sheva shanim 200 shana vayoled banim uvanot.
Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech ha'olam asher natan lanu Torah emet v'chai olam notah b'tochenu. Baruch atah Adonai noten ha'torah.
Amen. Amod Shishi, Amod Shishi, Nabad Yitzchak v'Sara, Shishi.
Baruch hu Adonai mevarach. Baruch Adonai mevarach le'olam va'ed. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech ha'olam asher bachar banu mikol ha'amim v'natan lanu et Torato. Baruch atah Adonai noten ha'torah.
So, which one is it? Vayechi Reu or Serug? Okay. Vayechi Serug 30, Amen. Vayechi Serug 30 shana vayoled et Nachor. Vayechi Serug acharei holedu et Nachor. 200 shana vayoled banim uvanot. Vayechi Nachor 29 shana vayoled et Tarach. Vayechi Nachor acharei holedu et Terach. 19 shana uma'at shana vayoled banim uvanot.
Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech ha'olam asher natan lanu torat emet v'chayei olam natan b'tochenu. Baruch atah Adonai noten ha'torah.
Amen. Yamod Shvi'i. David ben Abraham. Yamod David ben Abraham. Shvi'i.
Baruch Adonai Hamborach.
Baruch Namach Le'olam Va'ed.
Baruch Adonai Hamborach Le'olam Va'ed. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech ha'olam asher bachar banu mikol ha'amim v'natan lanu et Torato. Baruch atah Adonai noten ha'torah.
Amen.
Amen. Vayechi Terach 70 shana. Vayoled et Avram et Nachor et Haran. V'iled et Terach. Terach holid et Avram. Et Nachor et Haran. V'Haran holid et Lot. Vayamot Haran al pnei Terach aviv. Beres melodato bior kastim. Vayikach Avraham and Nachor lahem nashim. Shemesh et Avram Sarai. V'Shemesh et Nachor Milka bat Haran. Avi Milka v'avi Yiska. Vati Sarai akara. Ein la valad. Vayikach derech. Et Avram beno v'et Lot. Ben Haran ben beno. V'et Sarai kalato eshet Avram beno. Vayitzu itam. Meor kastim lalechet arza Canaan. Vayavo ad Haran vayishru sham. Vayu yemei terach. Chamish shanim 200 shana. Vayamot terach becharan.
Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech ha'olam asher asher natan lanu Torah emet v'chayei olam nata b'tochenu baruch atah Adonai noten haTorah.
Amen.
For this last reading that covered the seventh Aliyah and Maftir, it reminds us that the parashah, the separation of Torah, of Torah, is something that was not actually done by the rabbis, but we adopted for continuity of conversation, because this is the prologue of Avram. And we do get, you'll notice, the introduction of our protagonists for the next few parshiot, and potentially the first book, if Tolkien was writing it, of our story, and the foundation that there is Avram and his wife Sarai, who they point out is barren. Chatzi Kaddish.
We're going to do the Mishnah Berach.
Oh, Mishnah Berach, thank you.
So think of those ill in our community, and we'll sing this together. Mishnah Berach Avotenu Mikor HaBerach Limotenu. May the source of strength, who bless the ones before us, help us find the courage to make our lives a blessing, and let us say, Amen. Misheberach imotenu mikor haberach uvotenu. Bless those in need of healing with wrathful wash them up. The renewal of body, the renewal of spirit, and let us say, Amen. Yidgad Havid Gad Hashem Rabba. Amen. Yalabad Yivrach Yerachudei V'Yamelech Machudei B'chayechan U'Vyomechan V'chayim B'chol Beit Yisrael Bagala V'Vid Magari V'Imrel. Amen. Yesh Me'Rama Mevorach Li'olam Lo Me'amaya Yitbarach V'Yishtabach V'Yitpar V'Yitrama V'Yitnaseh V'Yitadar V'Yitaler V'Yitalal Shemere Kudeshah V'Yitla Mingo Birchata V'Shirata Tush Bechata V'Nechemata Daviram Yama V'Imrel. Amen.
Yamod, Achazan, Zev Shalom, Ev Harav, Ben Harav, Zvi Chaim, Ve'asna Leah, Chazak.
What is the Maftir story? 29? Okay.
Yeah, for Maftir, it's, we recite again verses 29 to 32.
Baruch Hu Adonai Baruch Adonai Baruch Le'olam Va'ed Baruch Atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher bachar banu mikol ha'amim v'natan lanu et Torato Baruch Atah Adonai Nutin HaTorah.
Amen.
V'yikach Avraham min Nachor lahem nashim shemished Avram Sarai shemished Nachor Milka bat Haran avi Milka v'avi Yisca Vati Sarai Akara ein la valad Vayikach derach et Avram beno V'Lod ben Haran ben Mino V'ed Sarai Galato eshet Avram beno Vayitzu itam meor kasdim Lalech et arza Kenan Vayavo ad Haran vayishvu sham Vayu yemet terach Chamish shanim u'matayim shana Vayamot terach becharan. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher natan lanu Torah emet v'chayei olam nata b'tochenu Baruch atah Adonai noten haTorah.
Amen.
Yamon Magbiya Yamon Golel.
We rise as the Torah is lifted and wrapped.
Vizot HaTorah asher sam Moshe lifnei bnei Yisrael al pi Adonai biyad Moshe.
As the Torah is being wrapped and set, a brief word about the Haftorah that comes from the book of Isaiah. It starts on page 65. First is that when you read the opening, especially the opening 3 verses, it almost seems like it could be a story that parallels that of Sarai, talking about the barren one whose children shall outnumber the espoused and enlarge the site of your tent, for you shall spread out to the right and the left. That sounds that sounds almost like a foreshadowing of what is going to be told to Avram. But it really is, more importantly, also a renewed covenant that on verse 9 talking about, it says, "For this is to me is like the waters of Noah." So a very direct connection. And the last thing I will leave you with is that this is one of the cases where the difference between the Ashkenaz tradition and the Sephardic tradition is quite different, meaning that as you see at the top of 64, the Sephardim only read chapter 54, verse 1 through 10. With you could say a proper Haftorah ending, because it's my covenant of friendship shall not be shaken, said the Lord, who takes you back in love, a proper ending. So, but the Ashkenaz continue all the way through chapter 55, verse 5. And so if you happen to be someone who likes to read the English, sort of try to figure out what is the difference in the message that the Sephardic rabbis versus the Ashkenazic rabbis were pulling from this text. Cantor Zev recites for us the Haftorah.
Thank you. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, asher bachar b'neviim tovim ratzav v'divreim, hanemarim be'emet. Baruch atah Adonai, habacher b'tzurav Moshe avdo, v'Yisrael amo, v'nvi'i ha'emet. Vatzedek. Rani akara lo yalada pischirin avatzali lachala kirami menishomema mi bledula amadonai chivi mukamo aleh viod mishkanota yatu adach zachi harichi metaraich vididadaich chazeki yaminus mo divati V'zarech miraj v'arim neshamot yoshivu al tiri gilo devashi v'ati gami gilo dachbiri ki v'osher alumayach tishkachi v'cherpat amunodayich lo tizkiriyot ki v'alayich usayich Adonai tzavot shemo v'goalich gidot Yisrael Elohei charetz yikarei ki lisha hazuvah Vatsuvaruach krach Adonai V'shenurim Kitzimai samar lahayich V'rega katon azavich Rachamim gidolim Akabtzich Shetzef getzef Histarti Fainai rega bimech V'chesed olam richamtich Amar goalich Adonai Ki mei Noach zohon li Asher nishbahati Me'avor mei Noach Ohod haaretz Ki nishbahati mitzof alayich umigarbach Ki harim yamushu Vagvahot imutena Bechazdi Mitich leyamush V'rish la milah tamud Amam rachamich Adonai Ani asora lo nuchama Hine anochi marbis papuch abanayich V'saditich matzapirim V'sabdich adgod shimshotayich Usharayich lavnei echdach V'chod givuleich lavnei chifetz V'chod banayich mudei Adonai Rav shalom banayich Mitzidaka tikonani, rachaki meoshek ilo tirai, umim chita, kilo tigra velayich, hein goyagur, efes meoti, migarita chalayich kipo. Hine yanachi barati charash, no feich beish beham, mortzichli lemaaseu, vanochi barati mashchit, lechabel, kol kli, Yutsar alayich lo yislach, v'chol hashon, takum mitach la mishpahat tarshi, zon, nachalat, avdi Adonai, v'tzid gadam, meiti numaronai, hoi godzami l'chul amayim, v'asheri lo kasef, l'chu shivu v'cholu, l'chu shivru, v'lo chesef, v'lo mechir, yayin v'chalav, Lama tishkelu chesed b'lo lechem, v'giachem b'lo savaha, shimo shamoa elai, v'chlutol, v'dita nagma deshen, nafshechem, ha'tuos nechem l'chu elai, shimo tu nafshechem, v'chmet halachem rit olam, chasdi David ha'ne'emanim, hein le'omim netativ, nagid mitzaveh le'omim, Hein goy lo teira tikra, the goy yadalucha, elecha yarutsu, the mananai elohecha, v'ligdash Israel, ki veyarach. Baruch Adonai Eloheinu melech olam, tzor kol olamim, tzadik b'chol derot, Hayalai nemahan omer v'yosem, medaber mekayim, shikol divaro, emet v'tzedek, Ne'eman atahu Adonai Eloheinu, v'ne'emanim d'varecha, v'ne'varecha midvarecha, acholo yashuv rigam, ki hamelech ne'eman, rachaman ata baruch ata Adonai, ela ne'eman b'chol devarav.
Amen.
Achim al tzion ki beit chayinu, v'la'aluvat nefesh, toshiah b'mirav yameinu, baruch ata Adonai. Misamech Zion bivanecha.
Amen.
Samecheinu Adonai Eloheinu b'liyahu haravi avnecha. V'malchut bei David mishichecha. Bimheirai Allah v'yagil libenu. Al gizah lo yishev zar v'lo yinchalun. Achirim ekivodo ki v'shem godshecha. Nishbad Allah shelo yachben irhal le'olam va'ed baruch ata Adonai. Magid David.
Amen.
Torah v'alavod alanavim v'lamashabat hazeh shenadad alanu Adonai Eloheinu likdu shavlim nucha lecha v'chol tivaret al hakol Adonai Eloheinu anachnu modim lach u'mevarchim odach yibarach shimcha b'fich ulai tamid l'olam va'ed baruch ata Adonai mikadesh hashabat.
Yasher koach.
If you've noticed, I had a little familiarity with that Haftorah because I've taught that to so many students. Each one of those verses had its own special resonance with me and some student. I can't remember the students, but the verses, I remember.
The first part of that is from it's the fifth Haftorah of consolation.
Yeah, it's very, very familiar. Anyway, we're making good time, Eric. Let's keep it on.
Page one. No pressure. Page 148, we join together at the top of the page. May the blessings of heaven, kindness and compassion, long life, ample sustenance, well-being, and healthy children devoted to Torah be granted to all members of this congregation. May the sovereign of the universe bless you, adding to your days and your years. May you be spared all distress and disease. May our protector in heaven be your help at all times. And let us say, Amen. May this land under your providence be an influence for good throughout the world, uniting all people in peace and freedom, helping them to fulfill the vision of your prophet. Nation shall not lift up sword against nation, neither shall they experience war anymore. And let us say, Amen. 2 lines from the bottom in the Hebrew. Lo yisa goy el goy chereb, velo yilmedu od milchama. Lo yisa goy el goy chereb, velo yilmedu od milchama. Amen. At the top of 149 in the Hebrew, Avinu Shebashamayim, Tzur Yisrael v'goalo, Barech et Medinat Yisrael, Reshit Michat Geulatenu, Hagen Alecha be'evrat chastecha, Ufros Aleha Sukat Shlomecha, Ushlach Orcha v'yamircha l'rashecha v'sarecha v'yuatzecha, V'taknem be'etzah tova milfanecha, Chazek Meginei Eretz Kodshenu, V'chanchilem Eloheinu Yeshua, V'ateret nitzachom ta'aterem, V'natata shalom ba'aretz, V'simchat olam liyoshvecha, V'nomar Amen. May we see the day when war and bloodshed cease, when a great peace will embrace the whole world. Let love and justice flow like a mighty stream. Let peace fill the earth as the waters fill the sea. And let us say, Amen. Ashrei, led by the great Ashreyer, Rabbi, page 151.
Ashrei Shveiteka od Yaluka Sela.
Ashreyam Shekapalo, Ashreyam Shadanayo.
Tila le David, Armim Kaloka Kamelet, Avrakashim Kaleolam Vaed.
Mechol Yom Avachecha, V'Halashim Chalelam Vaed.
Gadonai Mukulam Meo, Velikla Toe Cheker.
Dor L'Dor Yishbach Masecha, V'Ratecha Yagidu.
Adar Kefo Hoteka, Vidifrei Nifloteka Sika.
Zuz V'Ratecha Yomeru, Kodcha Saprena.
Seker of Tukaya Biu, Vesika Yeranenu.
Chanun Rechum Adonai, Erech Apayim V'Lo Chased.
Tovanai Lako, Verakamav Komasa.
Yodu Adonai Kol Maasecha, V'Hasidecha Yevachucha.
Kevomahutra Yomeru, Gevuraka Yetaberu.
Ve'odia Limeru Kenom Tav, V'Od Havar Malchuto.
Mahutra Mahukulami, Mumem Chapteka Bekoldor, Vador.
Somech Adonai L'chol Hanoflim, V'Zokev L'chol HaKruvim.
Eineko Eleka Yesaberu, Fanotin Lahem El Klam Beito.
Oteach et Yadecha, Maspil L'chol HaEratzon.
Sadik Adonai Bekotiraka, Vekasi Bekomasa.
Arov Adonai L'chol Korav, L'chol Asher Yikrohu V'Emet.
Rexoni Aviase, Veshavtam Yishma Vioshie.
Shomer Adonai Kol Ovav, Yet Kol Rishayim Yashmid.
Tila Adonai Yedaber Pi,
Yivarech Kol Basar, Shen Kotshol Elam Vaed. V'anachnu nevarech Ya, Me'ata V'yad Olam. Hallelujah. Page 153.
Hallelujah, Shem Adonai, Yenitzchah Shem Levado.
Adol Eretz V'Shamayim, Hayarem Keren Le'am.
Hallelujah,
Hallelujah.
Miss Morle Davi.
Avul Adonai Kavos, Avul Adonai Kevod Shemo, V'Shach Avul Adonai
Kol Adonai Hamayim El Kavod Yirim, Adonai Hamayim Rabbi. Kol Adonai Me'adar, Kol Adonai Shomer Orazim, V'Shomer Adonai Elozim Avano. V'Arkidim Kamo Ged Levano, V'Sirion Kamo V'Reimi. Kol Adonai Osed Lavo Eish, Kol Adonai Yahim Nibar, Yahil Adonai Nibar Kodesh, Kol Adonai Avolayah, Vayasof Yarod Uvekei Kalo, Kulo Mer Kavod.
Adonai Lamavuya.
Adonai
you rise for the bookmark between the Torah, well, I guess I don't know if it's your tradition, you rise for the bookmark between the Torah service and the extra service, Musaf Chatzi Kaddish, page 155.
Israel. Bagala, Bagala, Ubizman Karim. Amen. Yeshamei Rabba Mevorach, Le'olam Olam Me'omaya, Yitbarach, Yitbarach Vishtabach, Vidbar Vidma Vidnase Vidhadar, Vidale Vidalal, Shemere Kudisha, Merichu, Ehila Migo Birlachada, Vishirada, Tushbechata, Vimechemata, Damirad Bialma, Vimrel.
We join with Cantor Zev starting on page 156b.
Baruch Atah Adonai, Eloheinu v'Elokei Avoteinu, Elohei Avraham, Elohei Yitzchak, Elohei Yaakov, Elohei Sarah, Elohei Rivka, Elohei Rachel, Elohei Leah, Ha'el HaGadol, HaGibor v'Hanara, Elohim, Gomel Chasadim Tovim, V'ganei HaGahol, V'zacher Chasdei Avot, V'mevi Goel Livnei V'neihem, V'mahan Shemo B'yava, Melech Chazer U'Folkin Moshiach Magin, Baruch Atah Adonai, Magin Aram, V'Lokit Sarah, Atah Gibor Le'olam Adonai, Mechemiti Ma'ata, Rav L'Hoshia, Mashiv HaRuach Morid HaGashem, Mechalkel Chayim Bechesed, Mechayim Eitim Birachamim Rabim, Samech Naflim Beravech Olim, Umanir Asurim, Ubekayim Emunatoli, Shenei Avar, Michamal Chaba Gilrod, Umidah Melach, Melach Memi, Ubechayeh, Umatniach Yeshua, V'nemanat Alachayot Metim, Baruch Atah Adonai, Mechei HaMetim, Naritzecha V'nagishecha, Kisa Ozia, Zarvi Kadesh, Hamadishim, Shimcha Makodesh, Kakadu, Hayat Neviecha, Vigarazel Zeviamar, Kadosh, 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 Adonai Tzivahot, Melech Haaretz Givahodo, Givahodo Ma'aleolam, Mesharedav Shalim Zelazel, Hayim Yigam Givahodo, Ilmadam Baruch Yomeru, Baruch Adonai Mimgomo, Mimgomo, Even Berachamim, V'yachonam, V'yachonam Yachadim Shemo, Erev Revovoger, B'chol Yom Damir, V'amayim Yava, Shema Omrim, Shema Yisrael, Adonai Eloheinu, Adonai Echad. Eloheinu, Avinu, Machinu, Moshe yashmiyenu, ve'hu yashmiyenu, ve'rachamav sheini, le'enei gochai, li'olachem, le'elohim. V'divrei kodecha katuv le'mar, yimlach Adonai le'olam, ha'ach tziyah, le'dor v'dor, hallelujah. Le'dor v'dor, le'dor v'dor, le'dor v'dor, nagid golecha, le'dor v'dor, le'dor v'dor, le'dor v'dor, nagid golecha, u'le'nitzach nitzachim, kidushadecha nagish, kidushadecha nagish, shivchacha Eloheinu, mipinu lo yamus, le'olam va'ed. Lidor v'dor, lidor v'dor, lidor v'dor, nagid golecha, lidor v'dor, lidor v'dor, lidor v'dor, nagid golecha, kil melech gadol, gadol v'kadosh, gadol v'kadosh, Adam, kil melech gadol, gadol v'kadosh, gadol v'kadosh, Adam, Baruch Adonai, El HaGadosh.
Kaddish Shalem, page 181. Amen. 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 Shalom b'mama, uyase shalom aleinu, ve'al kol Yisrael, ve'imru, imru, amen. Yase shalom, shalom aleinu, ve'al kol Yisrael, yase shalom, shalom, shalom aleinu, ve'al kol Yisrael. Amen. Page 182. In Keloheinu, in Kadonenu, in Kemakenu, in Kemoshienu, mi Eloheinu, mi Kadonenu, mi Kemagenu, mi Kemoshienu, in Keloheinu, in Kadonenu, in Kemagenu, in Kemoshienu, Nada Eloheinu, Nada Eloheinu, Nada Elimagenu, Nada Lemoshienu, in Keloheinu, in Kadonenu, in Kemagenu, in Kemoshienu, Baruch Eloheinu, Baruch Adonenu, Baruch Emagenu, Baruch Emoshienu, in Keloheinu, in Kadonenu, in Kemagenu, in Kemoshienu, Atahu Eloheinu, Atahu Adonenu, Atahu Emagenu, Atahu Emoshienu, in Keloheinu, in Kadonenu, in Kemagenu, in Kemoshienu, Atahu Shekniru, Avodeinu, Leva Anecha, Et Getore Asamim, in Keloheinu, in Kadonenu, in Kemagenu, in Kemoshienu. Adinu Shabeach Adonai, La'ignu Lal Yosef Rishit, Shelo Asan K'Yaratzah, Velo Samanu K'Levadarama, Shelo Tzavtaginu Bahem, V'Gor Aleinu Yadol Hamonan, V'Namnu Gorim, V'Mitachadimu Morim, V'Nemelech, Malkei HaMelachim, HaKadosh Baruch Hu, She'odon Hashamayim ve'yosei haaretz, Avad Yavigaru b'shamayim mima'av, V'yadu Zov, V'gam Emeromi, Hu Eloheinu, Eino. Kagatsu b'Toratecha, Adonai Yimach le'olam va'ed, May the faith that binds us to our loved ones be a continuing source of comfort as we invite those who mourn and those observing Yortzeit to join in Kaddish Yatom. This week, our congregation calls to mind the memories of Hilda Balakov, Irving Berkowitz, Bessie Budgore, Bessie E. Barak, Max Husid, Samuel Jacob Fleissig, Herman Flower, Dr. Charles Friedman, Bertha Geller, Bernard Glasser, Toba Gross, Melvin Grossman, Maurice Hauptmann, Jetta Held, Henry Hellman, David Hershkowitz, Arthur Jefferson, Marion Katz, Mayor Katz, Pauline Katz, Matilda Taiba Kessler, Joseph Lewin, Harold Mann, Jack Marks, Morris Messy, Jack Morganroth, William Moss, Fanny Rosenbaum, Bess Shapiro, Sam Sherman, Joseph Silverman, Helen Simon, Max Mordechai Steinman, Ida Teitelman, Florence G. Waterman, George Weineck, Samuel Simon Welt, Milton Wintraub, and David Allen Zwick. Kaddish Yatom, page 184. Yit Gadal v'yit Kadash Shemei Rabbah v'yalmad divarach hirutei v'yamlich malchutei v'chayechon uvyomechon uvchaye dechol Beit Yisrael v'agala v'zman kari v'imru Amen. Yehei Shemei Rabbah mevorach leolam ulamei omaya. Yitbarach v'yishtabach v'yipoar v'yitromam v'yitnaseh v'yithadar v'yitaleh v'yitalal shemei dekudesha berichu la'ela min kol birchata v'shirata tush bechata v'nechemata damiran b'yalma v'imru Amen. Yehei shalama rabba min shemaya v'chayim aleinu v'al kol Yisrael v'imru Amen. Oseh shalom b'mramav hu yaseh shalom aleinu v'al kol Yisrael v'imru Amen.
Midu Kiddush.
I think so.
Please rise for Kiddush. V'shamiru b'nei Yisrael et ha-Shabbat L'asad et ha-Shabbat V'noru damri dalam Ve'eni u've'en b'nei Yisrael ha'oti Le'olam ki shesh et yamim Asa Adonai et ha-shamayim et ha'aretz U'vayom ha'sheni Shabbat v'inavash Ha'kim mirach l'raidim ha'Shabbat v'aygan Shehel Savrei Manan Rabbanan Rabbotai
Chaim.
Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech ha'olam borei pri ha'gafel
Amen.
See, it's a good thing I drank it all. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech ha'olam asher kedushanim mitzvotav v'tzivanu al netilat yadayim.
Amen.
Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech ha'olam hamotzi lechem min haaretz.
Invite forward Jenny Levy for this morning's announcements.
Shabbat Shalom. Shabbat Shalom. It's good to see everybody. We welcome Zev back. It's good to have you back, healthy, and everybody is good.
Everyone's great. It's great to be back, and I want to thank everybody in the congregation for supporting the services when I was in here, all those who participated. I watched you on the live stream. Eric, I'll teach you that word say. You can get it.
I paid more attention today. I think I might have it.
Yeah, good. Anyway, it's great to be back, everybody. Shabbat Shalom.
Shabbat Shalom. And Eric, it's great having you with us. Thank you so much. We always enjoy you. And it was a great service. We thank everybody for participating. And let's go forward. Okay. So let's see some of the announcements. The OCJCRC movie series begins soon. The first film, Unsettled, is a feature-length documentary revealing the untold stories of the LGBTQ refugees and asylum seekers who have fled intense persecution from their home countries and who are resettling in the U.S. You do have to register to watch this, but there are flyers out there that'll give you all the instructions and information as to what to click on and who to and what to. Anyway, as we all know, we're serving a light lunch after services, but there's one requirement. Does everybody remember what it is? You guys are so good, yes. So let's do that so we can have enough food for everyone. The Temple Beth Emet's transportation program is back. You need to call either Jack or Ken, and I'm missing some, but, excuse me? Barry. I knew I was missing someone. Anyway, any one of those three will help you out. It's a great program, and of course, there's no cost to anyone for this program. We just want you here. And just to remind you now that we are having live services, and we will still be live streaming. In order to count for the minyan, you actually need to be here. So please come here so you can be counted. Masks are required at services at all temple functions. Vaccinations are required for attendance indoors, except for medical exemption. We thank you for your cooperation. 5782 calendars, TB tidings, and other flyers may be found in the multipurpose room. And the poker group is starting back up, so if you'd like to play poker on Thursdays in the multipurpose room from 1 to 4, the person to contact is Gary Hunyu. And with that, I wish you all a Shabbat Shalom.
Shabbat Shalom. So before we conclude, I'd just like to say several weeks ago, really about 3 weeks ago, it was suggested to me to sing a certain melody for Adon Olam. I said, I'm going to do it the next Shabbat, and the next Shabbat, I forgot. And the last Shabbat, I wasn't here. But all that was appropriate because we're going to do the melody of Gilligan's Island to Adon Olam, and how appropriate to debut it, at least after a long absence, when we sing, when we read about the story of the flood, right? So here you go. See, it was meant to be. It was all meant to be. Okay. And thank you, Eric, for your assistance this morning. Ashikoff, it's always a pleasure to share the Bima with you.
Yeah, my pleasure to be here.
So, without further ado, Eric and I kept our pledge to make good time. Let's roll this. Let's conclude with 187. Adon Olam asher malach b'terem kol yitzir nivra v'nasa v'chesakol melech shemo nikra v'yacharei kichlot hakol v'ado yimloch nora v'hu haya v'hu hoveh v'hu yeh b'tifara v'hu echad v'yin sheni hamshilo hachbira beli reshit beli tachlit lo ve'hamisra Vehu Eli v'chai goli b'tzorchev li b'tzara Vehu nisi ulmanos li v'nagasi b'yom ekra B'yado avgid ruchi b'yeti shan v'yira V'im ruchi v'yati Adonai v'lo ira Adon Olam asher malach b'terem kol yitzir nivra V'nasa v'chesakol v'melech shemo nikra. Thank you, David Yagubi. Thank you. Shabbat Shalom.
Shabbat Shalom.